Woo woo! All right, I got to bring back my people. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for that one. All right, all right. Hey, y'all can check him out. That's my man, Brandon Woodson. Went to high school with him, doing big things, man. Putting together some nice projects, man. Definitely check it out. I'll send you guys the link. But without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and move on. Topic. Here we go. Bear with me as I get the banners and everything back. Yeah. Topic number 3. Diversity with Delilah. Yeah. What's up, Delilah?
Hey, look, I just wanted to start off by saying, look, I recognize as a woman that is Women's History Month starting today. But I just, but on top of that, for me, diversity is more than just, picking one month. Like, we should be celebrating all people all year round. Exactly. All the time. Not just 1 month, okay? The month should highlight, but it should go around year long.
Exactly.
So don't worry, I'll bring you some women, the next few weeks. But for me, it's really important to talk about this athlete, Jim Thorpe, because, a lot of people don't even know who he is because he was very big. Basically the turn of the early 20th century. So, a long time ago. But because of obviously a lot of reasons, one of them being that he was Native American. So there was a lot of, he faced a lot of racism and a lot of his accolades were not given to him, which were his due. So Jim Thorpe, I think, is very important because he was one of the first, all around sports guy. He could do everything. He was an Olympian. He could play baseball. It was crazy, the type of athlete that this man was. And so I just wanted to make sure that we kind of spotlighted Jim Thorpe and recognize his indigenous heritage, because that's, for me, is very important. As an educator, for me, I don't like whitewashed history. I'm just going to throw that out there. So I always want to make sure that people are given their due. So basically, he was born in what today is Prague, Oklahoma, because, towns change, names change, but that's basically the general area. He was a child of the Sac and Fox Potawatomi Indian bloodlines, born in 1887. So like I said, that's why I need to bring him up, right, over a century ago. But again, people forgot about him. He got lost to history, and I feel like that is unfortunate. But basically, everybody was always surprised because he was this big hulking dude, right? And again, he didn't fit in, right? He wasn't some blonde, blue-eyed dude, right? This is and so when you're thinking of an all-American, right, there's a certain thing pops to your mind, right? And so he broke down a lot, and his physique came from nature. He was an expert wrangler and breaker of wild horses. Okay, so he grew up in the wilderness, in the West, when the West was West. This is when Oklahoma was basically the wilds, right? And so
the territory.
Yeah. And so his physique really came naturally. Then of course he worked out and added to it and stuff like that. But a lot of it really did come from him being outdoorsy and really being a outdoors kind of guy. Anyway, so being that this was the turn of the 20th century, this country has a very bad history of, taking people from their families and sending them to other places. Anyway, so he is from Oklahoma, but he went to Native American industrial school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So that's basically where he went to college. That's where he did track and field. He basically would go there in his work clothes. He would just show up, run track. Can you imagine? Looking at this dude, so he's over 6 feet tall. He just shows up from the field and he's running track and stuff. He launched himself over a 5'9" high bar to break the school record, and he caught the attention of a coach. So he became the star of their track program. Again, he played baseball, hockey, lacrosse. He even ballroom dance, right? Because I don't know if you know, like some of these guys actually get told to take dance lessons, right? So they could work on their footwork. Like that's actually not. Yeah, that's not. True. Like there really are players that like will take dance because it'll teach some movement. Anyway, so he was also, of course, All-American football, right? Because so All-American football at Carlisle in this Indian school. He won the pentathlon and the decathlon in the 1912 Olympics. And they were revoked from him. There was a very big controversy. He won 2 gold medals in 1912 at the Olympics, and they were revoked because he played minor league baseball. And I guess supposedly you were supposed to be doing,
what?
Yeah. So
amateurism. Okay.
So he was stripped of his medals because he really should have been just focusing on one sport or whatever at this point. But we really know why he was stripped of his medals. Because can you imagine? Like this was first of all, I have to say that these Olympics took place in like Sweden, like land of like Vikings and stuff. So so here you go. But anyway, it took forever for his family to get his medals back. So finally in 1983.
What?
Yeah.
83. Good God.
1983 is when the medals were returned to his family, but as a co-winner, even though he won gold medal. Yeah. So obviously now they're still fighting to be like, he wasn't the co-winner. He won.
Co-winner.
He's the winner.
Get out of here.
So now the family is fighting for them to change that record and make him the sole winner of which he was. Yeah. So anyway, so after the Olympics, he signed with the Canton Bulldogs for $250 a game. That was a lot of money in that time because it was 1915. Yeah. He won championships with this team in 1916, 1917, 1920. Then he kind of moved around. Thorpe went on to play for the NFL's Cleveland Indians, the Rock Island Independence, the New York Giants, and the Chicago Cardinals through 1928.
There you go. Wow.
So, he played a lot of football. Thorpe encountered a lot of difficulties in his career. So he did something that we should all be familiar with. He actually sought a career in Hollywood because we know that players of color at this time, when they ran into bullshit, they were like, whatever, fine.
Let's move on.
Yeah. Right. So he sought a career in Hollywood, and while he was credited at KISS, he appeared in more than 60 films from 1931 to 1950. And he got typecasted, right, as a stereotypical, American Indian.
Obviously, yeah.
So then what did he do? He went and he formed his own casting company to pressure Hollywood studio into casting authentic Native Americans for the roles. And so he also started procuring land for the Sac-a-Fox Nation because land back, we think about that now, but land back has been around for a long time. Like Native Americans have been fighting to get their territory, right, their sovereign land back for a long time. Right. So he was part of that in the beginning. In 1963, that's when he was elected a charter member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This was postmortem because he passed away in 1953 of a heart attack. And because this were the days, he didn't pass away in affluent surroundings, right? And so really weird stuff happened. Like his family wanted him to have a traditional indigenous burial and then like do this other stuff because he was married a few times, but his last wife, Patsy, was your kind of stereotypical white lady who marries a man of color, but really doesn't accept the fact that he's a person of color.
And hope that he'll assimilate.
And so like she never accepted his indigenous heritage. And so even though he had no kids with her, because she was his last wife, she had final say. So I guess they said that they were going to do the whole ceremony and then do like a Christian ceremony. But I guess she came in last minute and took the body and took his body and was trying to get like this monument, all these different stuff in Oklahoma. And people were like, no. So what did she do? She went to Pennsylvania And that's where she convinced a bunch of poor townies in Pennsylvania to support this idea, which I think you guys should know. There's Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. So it's because she convinced all these people that would be a good idea to have my husband, like, you know, named after this town. It'll bring tourists. It didn't bring tourists. So unfortunately, this town was basically tokenized Jim Thorpe, who was this all-American, not the town's fault today, but, you know, your ancestors, guys, I don't know, maybe not the best idea. But that's basically where his mausoleum is. That is where he's buried. And, but yeah, so Jim Thorpe played football. He was like your bit, you know, like when you think about like your big, like kind of football players, like he was super athletic. And I'm hoping that we can like bring his personality back. And I hope that people start acknowledging who he was and give him his due, because he could play any sport really and excel really well in it. And so that's Jim Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you so much, Delilah. And that I'm glad you talked about that, because we can't even say how many people do not know who this man is and or was. Like he was.
I wish I could show you a picture. Yeah, he was like
who he truly was, right? Like who he truly was,
right.
You know, we always say, like you've heard the name. You've heard the name Jim Thorpe, but can you really say you know anything about him? Because even you know, with this subject we were talking about this, even when Delilah said, "Well, I'm going to cover Jim Thorpe," I'm like, "Well, I know the name. I know Jim Thorpe as, you know, as a name and as a figure, and you know, in the Olympics and all that, as an athlete and all that, but you don't really know the story behind, which is so great. That's why I really appreciate something like this. You get to learn a little bit more.
There he is in his there he is in his football uniform, like yeah. So like
kind of looked like me in high school. No, I'm kidding. I was never that tall, so it wasn't me.
You know, so there's, you know, your you know, so again, like for him, he went through a lot of challenges being a Native American man. So a lot of his stuff, you know, he was tokenized, right? People didn't take him serious.
Sure.
He got stripped of medals. He left football because, you know, it really wasn't, you know. So Jim Thorpe, the reason I'm highlighting him because he did play football, so he was a football player. But I also wanted to highlight that he basically could play any sport and excel.
Right.
And so.
And he was amazing. Honestly, he was amazing. He was one of those guys that's like the folklore. You know, this man like ran like the triathlon, and you know, was in the Olympics and all this crazy stuff. He was like a superhuman. You know, but like you said, Delilah, because of the fact that he was indigenous, you know, people didn't want to respect his ability. They didn't want to respect his greatness. And it's a shame that time period and that era like tried to hide all of that greatness for so long that now we're looking back at it like, oh my God, if we would have only had the kind of publicity and the kind of attention now that we have them, this guy would have been the greatest of everything, because he could do everything, and that's what was so amazing about him, that he can do everything. So thank you so much, Delilah. I love that. That was nice. I'm glad you brought up Jim Thorpe, because that is somebody that I wanted to touch. So we'll definitely look forward to what you got coming next week. Oh yeah, I am excited about it. Thank you for that. All right.